So we're here to talk about that we launched an app, which isn't particularly interesting, although I don't think it's that interesting because everyone's doing it these days, but the circumstances around how we did it and the constraints we had were quite interesting. We work for a company called Ibcos. We do an ERP for agricultural, construction and ground care dealers. ERP meaning we just manage your business financially and procedurally. So if you say you want to do payroll, or you want to manage a parts inventory, or you want to manage service or warranty for tractors, that's what we build software for. I'm Greg. I manage the software and product teams at Ibcos.
I'm Mike. I'm team lead of the initiatives team.
And we had help from Dan, who's also on there and helped build the app. Cool. I need one of those Zapper things, don't I?
Yeah.
They keep coming in and out of frame. Maybe I can move this. So we called it Zero to Hero because historically at Ibcos we haven't launched an app, although we've tried a few times. And so even though we identified in the past that a mobile strategy is something of value to our customers, every time we tried to do it, it didn't work. And I think that's quite interesting. And then we made some changes and brought some new people on, and we've managed to do it. And in fact, we then, after having basically 2.5 years of not delivering, we sort of started again, and we actually got one going in 90 days. So that's the premise of the talk, basically. And so we're going to talk through some of the lessons we learned. They're not really phrased as lessons, but just some of the things that happened. It's not really a story, just a series of sort of interesting things that went along and that kind of stuff. So, cool. But the bit that we didn't say that was a bit of a trick just to get you through the door, that I think is interesting, is that we are what I'm calling a brownfield environment. And if you're into construction, which you're probably not, you have greenfield, which are these lovely, great open spaces that are saying, come and develop for me, and then you have brownfield, and they're polluted, and they've probably got old buildings on them, and before you can do what you want, you have to sort that out, and you probably find stuff. So as a product, we are definitely brownfield, and so that presented its own series of challenges in terms of getting an app out there. So first of all, what is the app? There's some screenshots there. Essentially, it's a time recording app, and it allows mobile engineers for agriculture to, they go out on site. As you can imagine, it's quite annoying if you need to get your tractor serviced and you have to drive it at 30 miles an hour to the dealer, which is 200 miles away. So actually in the agriculture industry, servicing happens on site, on the farms themselves, and so mobile engineers will have parts in their truck and they will travel to site and do the work on site. And in order to bill for that, to invoice, you have to know how much time they spent on it. And so what they do is, or what we built, is a way that they can do that on their phones, essentially. And basically we're replacing barcode hardware. So previous to having an app, they actually had machines like this that were sat back at the depot, and they would use these to scan barcodes, which are printed out on these, which are job cards, and that's how they would record their time. So you can't see this, but we'll pass it around. So it says start job, end job. And so they would take these out on site, they'd record on a piece of paper what they did, scan it into these barcodes, and then crucially they had to come back to the depot, dock the barcode scanner. That would then work out how much they spent on it, and then you could invoice. And if they're out on site, they might not go back to depot for 30, 40 days, which means you can't invoice for that amount of time. And cash flow is very, very important in an ag dealer, so they have to get that invoicing done. So, the other thing that's quite interesting is that these are blimmin' expensive. I know we've got some people who work in this world. Like, one of these units is like 300 quid.
Crazy.
You know, and all it does is scan barcodes. So every time we sell it, our customers are like, "Oh, you telling me I've got to buy 20 scanners, 300 quid a scanner?" I mean, that's a lot of money. And that can be a barrier to taking up the service. So we also wanted to start addressing that, you know, because if I can sell it for a little bit cheaper but build it for a lot cheaper, that improves my margins. So it's good. Yeah, so replacing really expensive hardware. They want to scan a barcode, etc., etc., submit to invoicing. I mentioned that. So, because I'm super agile, there's my story. Doesn't come across very well. So that I can accurately invoice my customers, as a mobile engineer, I want to be able to log and submit my activity as it happens. So that was the premise of the app, basically. So I mentioned that we are brownfield, and you see the app there. So you can see you're using the camera to scan the barcode. That creates a log of what you've done, and then this button here would upload it. We've got it here if you want to mess with it later on the break or whatever, so you can see it. But you might be thinking, well, that's dead simple. How, that doesn't feel like 90 days to me. Yeah, you may be about right, but that's why I talk about this brownfield concept, because a lot of the stuff challenges we face is that the architecture was already decided. This wasn't new, so we weren't saying, right, well, let's build a Node app and just use, insert new technology here. We had a system that we had to work with, basically. And some of that code actually goes back 40 years, so it's a pretty old system. We had a guy on the team, Colin, he retired, 2 weeks ago?
Yes.
And because I managed that team, I had to arrange his sort of leaving present and what have you. And so I thought, I'll get him something that relates to when he started at Ibcos. And he started in 1977, and that was before I was born, surprisingly, and probably everyone else in this room. So it's a very old legacy in the app. I wasn't going to say the word legacy. So you're faced with this architecture that means it's got its problems and it's been around for 40 years, and you want to build this app and you want to do all this new cool stuff. What do? Oh, just rewrite it. Just start fresh and do that. You just can't. You can't do that because you have existing customers, you have existing commitments, and rewriting would take an awful lot of time, and you're going to miss tons of stuff. And so you just can't do that. So. We didn't have that available to us. We couldn't build it on the side as this brand new thing. We had to accommodate that. And the reason I bring that up is because those sort of restrictions can kill a project and even a whole company, because they just can't move because they're just so paralyzed by these restrictions. And so this is how these new young startups, etc., they come in underneath because they don't have those restrictions. So we were quite conscious of that and saying that we need to do this. I'd already mentioned we'd had a couple of failed projects, and we needed to get them done. So that was important. So we sort of started with 3 key tenets. That is a real word. It's the 3 things that we thought, right, we've got to stick to these. The first was we were going to iterate. So it is a simple app, and that is intentional. We're not trying to build everything we know about. So we did look at sort of the vision for what we want to do for mobile engineers, and we picked one thing, and that's what we built. So you've heard about MVP, all of that. So that was really important to us. So what you see is version 1, and there is a roadmap that would build it out. And if we sort of fast forward 5 years and look back, it will be a pretty comprehensive app. But we will have been selling it all the time that we're building it. So that was quite important. The second thing was focus. It's quite easy, especially when you start showing stuff and people say, oh, now it can do this and now it can do that. And we were like, nope, we're doing this. This is what we're doing. This is our focus. We're going to stick to this, because that scope creep can mean, oh, we'll just put a week on, we'll put another couple of weeks on. And we didn't want to do that. So we were quite focused as well. Stick to the minimum. And the other thing is some kind of acceptance. We have to agree that it won't be perfect. That there were things that we knew that it wasn't going to do, but that wasn't going to stop us. We weren't going to throw it away and just say, well, that's the end of it. We said, right, okay, that's fine. We know that, and we were telling our customers this as well. We know that it won't be perfect, that's okay, and then we'll carry on. And a lot of that is because we were focused, so we didn't want to, deviate from that, and also because we were iterating, so we knew we could do it later on. So they were the 3 sort of key things to make sure we were able to deliver. I'm going to go through some architecture now, Greg style. So we have a farmer and a mobile engineer over here. So this is what we had to build, essentially. So I didn't set that up properly. So this is the architecture of what we've built. And then our system is called Gold. It's quite interesting in that it's, I would call it an appliance, and that means that it's not in the cloud, we're not that modern. It is installed onto a physical server that we then install inside the dealer's warehouse, basically. And sometimes it's literally under the desk of the MD and things like that. But that's another talk, why it's like that. So the mobile engineer has a phone. They want to record their time, so we needed to get the time. That was quite complicated, getting the time off the phone. That wasn't. We had to access the camera so that we could scan the barcodes. And so there's a barcode. Then because we had to maintain compatibility with the existing system, that was based around a CSV file that was pumped into the Gold server and then processed. So we had to maintain that compatibility. We didn't want to rewrite Gold because that's a rewrite, and that's what I didn't want to do. So the architecture was recreate that file, pump it into where it was expected to be anyway, and carry on. So get that to Gold. Of course, we're not in the network now. We're outside the network, so we're going over the internet. And then we hit a problem. I'm so proud of that. Can you see them weathering?
Took them a week.
It's like real fire.
So we have a firewall because we're in network, so we're not on the cloud. You can't do that. Farmers and dealers and that sort of industry, they're not a modern IT industry, so they're like, I don't want to have my data accessed and all that kind of stuff. So we needed a way that we could poke through that without just opening ports on the server. And that meant we had to basically build a sort of proxy in the middle. There is a technical name for this. I can't remember what it is. I think Microsoft Azure do it, and they call it the Azure Service Bus Relay, I think. Look that up. So we had to build that as well. So essentially the architecture for the 90 days, although we didn't say we wanted to build it in 90 days, that just sort of happened, but this is what we were building. So we ended up having to build an API. We needed to build a proxy server that would allow us to get back home, wherever you were in the world, and build the physical app that made the compatibility. Cool, that was the natural break. But we can carry on. Oh no, actually there's one more slide before the break, sorry, we added this in last minute.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, okay.
Give us one more slide.
So you might still be thinking, how could that take 90 days? That still seems a lot of time. And I'm sort of beating a dead horse here. But you are right. It was, for what we've done, it does feel like it's a lot of time. So like we're under no illusions. I'm not trying to say like, oh, look what we've done in 90 days, aren't we amazing? And you're thinking I could have done that while you were talking. So I thought it was worth looking at how we burnt that time through. And it may not surprise you. Because of the type of company we are profitable, we are quite large. We have 450 customers. Some of them have like 8 or 9 depots of tens of users per depot. So we have a lot to do. And that 90 days is continuous time. And from a development perspective, half of that was just being a business and just having to deal with other things that were happening. And again, that's one of the things that can get missed when we all look at startups and how nimble and stuff they are, because they don't have that problem. They can absolutely just get on with what they're doing, but we didn't have that sort of luxury. We do, in the way that we organise the teams, try to give that focus. So actually this project was on a dedicated team, and so they only have 2 or 3 things to do at once, but even that meant that their attention was divided. So. What have I put there? Yeah, we had to build that API, so that isn't really even app related. We had to make sure that we could get the data back in, and because the Gold is quite old, that wasn't that easy to do, essentially, and so just building an API took 30 days. We'll come back to this later, but we had to build a SQLite adapter as well, and that's because the framework we use, which is called EXT, which Mike will talk about, didn't have a way built in to store the barcodes locally, which is incredibly surprising, and no doubt we'll talk about that. So we didn't know that at the beginning, and we had to build that as we went through, which basically meant that the app itself took about 5 days. So it is a bit of a lie to say it was 90 days. However, the app doesn't do anything without the rest of it. So it was really 90 days. But anyway, so that is definitely, because I've seen the next slide, the gap.
Oh, it's not liberalised. I didn't tell anybody that they can have a drink. So it depends on how you want to make people suffer during the talk. So during this 30, there's water. And
Shall I just carry on?
yeah, fire
I think I've got everyone's attention.
I feel like that, yeah.
All right, this is Mike's turn now. So
Okay.
Mike is the developer. I'm just the talker. So
So, what did we choose? So, as Greg said, we chose EXT.js. I'll go through why in a second. And we also chose Cordova to actually get the EXT.js app onto the device. Now, why did we choose EXT.js? Well, it has a cross-platform framework that allows us to make apps for web, desktop, tablets, mobile. So it's quite a generic framework that you could use to make your apps with. It's very similar to Ionic and Angular and React and all of those in that way it works. So it comes with a command line tool that you can use to create your views. So it all sounded quite good to us. It has a great ability to deal with data intensive apps, which this looks like an app that's going to become like that, and it already is now. So it has lots of plugins and components that we can use with grid views and list views. It's written in JavaScript, so it's quite friendly to us. We know JavaScript quite well as a team. It's themable, so we can make it look like an Android app, we can make it look like an iOS app, we can make it look like a web page, we can make it look like a desktop app. And we add in an in-house experience because team members are already using this framework with another project to us. So why did we use Cordova? Well, Cordova is almost the only way other than PhoneGap to get a mobile app onto a device for offline use. It's open source, so it meant that we could deal with that. There's lots of native plugins, so we could talk to SQL, we could have a barcode reader, we could have network access. It works with EXT.js because that comes built in as part of this, so it's really simple to join the two together. And it's got command line tools, so as I said earlier, we can create a app just by typing in the command to run a Cordova app, and away we go. So I'm going to show you some code now. So this is a simple Hello World app in EXT.js. So in this, we simply create a viewport, we add a panel to it, and then in that panel we can put HTML. Hello World, and that will create a white app with Hello World in it. We can create a proxy, and a proxy is a way of communicating through the network. So we can say here, what is the type of model? So an employees here is, for example, we extend the store, so a group of employees. We can alias it, so we can say this is called employees internally with a lowercase s, sorry, lowercase e. And then we can create the actual proxy itself, which is saying we're using a type of AJAX, and then we tell it what URL to use, and off it goes. So it deals with all the post, get, and update commands for us, so we don't have to worry much about that. We can just say, here's the object, go and get as many as you can from the server. Makes it very simple. And then to build, we just simply can run center app build. And at the end of that, we'll get a HTML document with some JavaScript files that we can stick on a server, or we can stick in a Cordova app, and off we go. Right. This one is an example of the app JSON. So in EXT.js, we can create a JSON file which describes how we're going to build things. So we can say, for the Android platform, we want to build it like this, and we're saying the packager is Cordova, the platform's Android. So now we can just go ext build Android, and we would get an Android app at the end of it, an APK. So what was our build process like? Well, we'd run the essential build command, which would take our JavaScript files and minify them. It would process the SAS, making a CSS file. It then copies the files into the Cordova project area, and then calls the native tools to build actual native apps over them. Android app, APK, iOS app, IPA. We then added Jenkins into the mix so that we could make our life easier in trying to get to build. So every time we do a commit into Git, it fires off to Jenkins. Jenkins grabs the file from Git, does the build, and produces the APK or the IPA, depending on what we're trying to build at the time. It does both. And then we put it into what's called Hockey App. I don't know if anyone's heard of that here, which lets you distribute the app between the team or between your customers. So we have several teams. So we have a team that's internal for us that we test the apps with, and then we've got a customer base which are early adopters, which we can test on, and we just can put the app into that team, and they can see the app straight away, and it alerts them. They can give us feedback, and it reports any crashes or failings that are going on in the app. So it's quite a nice way of doing it. What was the good of this, really?
That's not going to appear yet. But it has.
Going wrong. So it's quick to prototype. I'll do that one first. It's built for web. So it's the standards that we understand: HTML, JavaScript, CSS. Very easy for us to use as a team. It's easy to install on mobile devices. As I said, it's just a simple command to run, and you've got an app ready to go. You can access the hardware capabilities. So because of the Cordova plugins, we can talk to all the hardware parts of the phone that we want to. What's the bad? So what? Tracking down errors can be hard, we discovered. So if an error happens before the app started up, which happened occasionally, we wouldn't get an error message, we wouldn't know why. It took us quite a while to then sit down and figure out why is this error happening. If we've got an error coming through the console, you don't have a JavaScript console natively on the app, and you have to attach it to a browser, and that's not very efficient. At times it just doesn't come back with errors that are happening. The ext class system is quite difficult in the JavaScript world because it's fighting what JavaScript's all about, which is more functional with objects built in, where this is trying to make it very much an object-oriented system. So ext.js, you create classes, and you create them with string names, so it's easy to make a mistake. You won't find that out until you actually come to try and run the app as well, because the compile process doesn't pick that up, so easy to make mistakes with. It doesn't easily enable TDD, and I'm quite passionate about test-driven development, and we found it so hard at times we had to not test parts of it where we really wanted to, just because of the way the class system works, the way it works. We had to mock out so much stuff, and in the end what we tested other than our mocks, it got to silly stage. So parts of the app have not been tested as well as we'd like. It confuses MVC and MVVM because ext.js has been around for a while. That was around when MVC was popular. MVVM came out to be really popular. They've bolted that onto it, and you end up with a system where you've got a controller and a view model, and you're trying to work out what should go where. Can get really confusing because why have we got a controller and a view model? Doesn't make much sense. And then the really ugly of this is it's not intuitive. If you come from the JavaScript world straight into ext, it is really hard to get your head around. It's fragile. As I said, if we make a mistake in the class names because they're strings, it will blow up in your face, and it'll be hard to track down some of the errors in it. There's a very nice error that we keep finding in the development mode. If you don't require parts of plugins and things like that in development, it works fine. In production, it falls over demanding the require, and you're left going, well, what do you require? Because it doesn't tell you that. It just says C is not a constructor. And you're like, where does that go? And you have to then start digging out. Many times we've hit that one. It's slow to deploy. It takes a few minutes at least each time to get it from code to a device to see if you're working. So when you're trying to just move a button, change the colour, it's quite a hard process to go around, and we haven't found an easy way with EXT where we could just do it in live reload. As far as I can tell, there doesn't seem to be one. There's no common data strategy. So as Greg said, we had to write a proxy just to talk to a SQL database. We thought when we were starting this that there was already something built in to do that. Turns out, no, we had to manually do it ourselves, and that caused us quite a few problems. As Greg alluded to, it was a lot of work to actually get that to be done. And it's hard to recruit for. During that time, our teams changed and we've had to find new employees. And most people have not heard of it, EXT.js. I certainly hadn't when I started. So when you're looking for recruitment, lots of people like Angular or React. So when you start saying those, everyone's happy to go for it. When you go EXT.js, people are like, what's that? So I think that's me done.
Yeah. All right. So that's really the how we did it. So we had these principles about how we built it. We knew what we were going to build. We were focused, and we knew what we weren't going to do. We used EXT and Cordova for the reasons we said, which mostly was because they were already there, and we needed to build to web as well. And so, if we were going to do it again, would we recommend it? Maybe. I mean, this question comes up every time at Mobile Dorset. Should you build hybrid or native? It'll probably come up later, but the answer every time is it depends, and it really does. For us, it was the right decision because we already had some code that was in EXT, so we didn't want to then have to support another framework. The Cordova thing sounds promising, and we wanted to get to market really quickly and cross-compile. I don't know if that's the right word for it, but have multiple outputs. So for us, it was the right thing to do. So what will we do next time? Well, this is going to get a bit awkward because we already rebuilt it in Xamarin. So since that 90 days has been done, we were talking about all of these sort of problems, and then basically Mike, I think it was you, wasn't it? Just thought, well, I'll give it a try, and just by trying, we had it in Xamarin. And so now, actually, we'll probably go forward with Xamarin instead. So it was lessons learned. It was a great experience for us. We got to market. We achieved our business goals. We learnt some stuff. We will now go through with Xamarin. If you remember my burn that I did earlier, a significant portion was just building the API. So, of course, actually, the rebuild, you're not building the whole thing again. We were just building the app. So it's a bit of an unfair comparison. But we have been incredibly impressed with Xamarin. You still get the same benefits of write once and multiple artifacts come out the other end. We decided we don't need web, because one thing you can't do with Xamarin is compile to web. And when I say compile to web, you can't take a Xamarin app and access it through the browser. It has to be an app. Whereas for one of our other projects, we need apps and browser. So we are continuing to use EXT for that, because otherwise we'd have to build two separate. Every time we had a feature, we'd have to build it twice. So Xamarin does look promising, and I think we'll keep with that.